Chapter 3. Gautama. In the town of Savatthi, every child was familiar with the name of the illustrious Buddha, and every household stood ready to fill the alms bowls of Gautama's disciples as they moved through the streets in silent begging. Near the town lay the Jetavana Grove, a favorite abode of Gautama, which had been gifted to him by the wealthy merchant Anathapindika, a devoted follower. In their persistent search for the Buddha, Siddhartha and Govinda were directed to this district by the stories and answers of the local people. Upon their arrival in Savatthi, they were immediately offered food at the very first house where they stood. When Siddhartha inquired about the Buddha's whereabouts, a kind woman informed them that the perfect one resided in the garden of Anathapindika, a place large enough to shelter the vast crowds who journeyed from afar to hear his teachings. Govinda was filled with joy, realizing that their long pilgrimage was finally nearing its end. The woman shared that she had often seen the illustrious one walking silently in his yellow cloak, holding out his bowl at house doors before returning with it filled. Though Govinda wished to hear more, Siddhartha reminded him that it was time to proceed toward the grove. As night fell upon Jetavana, the two Samanas found a place to rest amidst a constant stir of voices from new arrivals seeking shelter. At sunrise, they were astonished by the sheer multitude of believers and seekers who had spent the night there. The magnificent grove was alive with monks in yellow robes, some lost in deep meditation under the shade of trees, and others engaged in spirited discussion. Even the Buddha himself took part in the morning ritual of begging for his single daily meal. Siddhartha recognized him instantly, as if guided by a divine intuition. He saw a man in a yellow cowl, bearing an alms bowl, moving with an unassuming yet profound grace. Siddhartha whispered to Govinda, "Look, there is the Buddha." Govinda gazed at the monk, who appeared no different from the hundreds of others in dress, yet possessed a unique stillness. Gautama walked lost in thought, his peaceful face reflecting neither happiness nor sadness, but a gentle, secret, inward smile. Every finger of his hand and every step he took radiated an invulnerable peace and a sense of complete fulfillment that sought nothing and imitated no one. That evening, as the heat of the day subsided, the crowd gathered to hear the Buddha preach. His voice was perfect quiet, yet firm and full of peace. He spoke of suffering, the origin of suffering, and the path to release through the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. His words reached the listeners like a steady light or a distant star. When the sermon ended, many pilgrims stepped forward to join the community. Among them was the shy Govinda, who pledged his allegiance to the Buddha and was accepted into the order. Later that night, Govinda asked Siddhartha if he would also join, but Siddhartha remained silent. He blessed Govinda for finally taking a step based on his own conviction and told him that their paths must now diverge. Govinda wept as he realized his friend was leaving him, but Siddhartha reminded him that as a monk, he had now renounced all ties, including friendship. The following morning, Siddhartha met Gautama in the grove. With great courage, he asked for permission to speak his thoughts. Siddhartha praised the Buddha for showing the world as a perfect, unbroken chain of cause and effect. But he pointed out a small gap. The doctrine of salvation seemed to break that logical unity. The Buddha, listening with equanimity, warned Siddhartha against the thicket of opinions, explaining that his goal was not to explain the world, but to provide salvation from suffering. Siddhartha respectfully replied that while he believed Gautama was indeed the Buddha, he also believed that enlightenment could not be communicated through words or teachings. He argued that the secret of what happened during the Buddha's hour of enlightenment was something one must experience for oneself. Therefore, Siddhartha chose to leave all teachers behind to reach his goal alone. As they parted, the Buddha smiled at Siddhartha's cleverness but warned him to be on his guard against it. Siddhartha left the grove, feeling that while the Buddha had robbed him of his friend, he had given him something far more valuable, himself. Chapter 4. Awakening. As Siddhartha left the grove in which the Buddha and Govinda remained, he felt that he had also left his former life behind him. As he slowly went on his way, he reflected deeply, reaching a point where he recognized causes. For to recognize causes, it seemed to him, is to think. And through thought alone, feelings become knowledge and begin to mature. Siddhartha realized that he was no longer a youth, but a man. Something had left him, like an old skin shed by a snake, the desire to have teachers and to listen to their teachings. He had left even the greatest teacher, the Buddha, because he realized that the one thing he wished to learn, the self, could not be taught by anyone else. He had spent his life trying to rid himself of the self, to conquer or hide from it, yet he knew less about himself than anything else in the world. He realized that the reason he remained alien to himself was that he was afraid of himself and was fleeing from his own nature. He had sought the divine and the absolute by trying to destroy his own identity, but in doing so, he had lost himself on the way. Siddhartha looked up and around him, and a strong feeling of awakening from a long dream spread through his being. He decided he would no longer try to escape from Siddhartha, nor would he spend his life studying Vedas or practicing asceticism to find a secret behind the ruins of his existence. Instead, he would learn from himself and be his own pupil. He looked at the world as if for the first time. It was beautiful, strange, and mysterious. The blue, yellow, and green of the sky, river, and woods were no longer the veil of Maya or meaningless diversities to be despised by a Brahmin seeking unity. He saw that meaning and reality were not hidden behind things, but were in them. He felt he had been deaf and stupid, treating the world like worthless shells when he should have been reading it letter by letter, like a book. Now, he felt truly awakened, and as if he had only been born that day. However, as these thoughts passed through his mind, he suddenly stood still. He realized that as a newly born man, he must begin his life completely afresh. Previously, he had intended to return home to his father after his years of asceticism, but now he saw that he was no longer an ascetic, a priest, or a Brahmin. He could no longer return to sacrifices or meditation in his father's house. An icy chill stole over him as he realized how truly alone he was. He was no longer part of any class, guild, or community. Even Govinda now belonged to the brotherhood of monks, but Siddhartha belonged nowhere. At that moment, as the world around him seemed to melt away, and he stood alone like a star in the heavens, he felt a moment of icy despair. Yet, he was more firmly himself than ever before. This was the last shudder of his awakening, and the final pain of his rebirth. He moved on again, walking quickly and impatiently, no longer toward his home, and no longer looking back.